Whoa! Is this real money? I got to get this out of here! This is mine now! Go, go, go!
The money wasn't his. That was the first thought Caden had when he pulled the bag from the dirt. The second thought was worse. Dad is dying. Nobody in Millbrook, Ohio knew Caden Pruitt was sleeping in the woods. They saw the house on Ridgemont Drive, 3 stories, stone driveway, the kind of lawn that got mowed twice a week. They saw the family name on the donor wall at the hospital. They assumed the boy who used to ride his bike down Sycamore Lane was still inside that house, eating dinner, doing homework, sleeping in a bed. They were wrong. Caden hadn't slept in a bed in 11 days. It started the night Renee threw his shoes out the front door. Not a fight, not a warning, just his old Nikes hitting the porch steps, one after the other, while she stood in the doorway with her arms crossed and her jaw set like concrete. "You don't live here anymore," she said. He was 14. His father, Devin Pruitt, the Devin Pruitt who had built Pruitt Industrial from a 2-man operation into a regional powerhouse, was upstairs, in bed, staring at the ceiling. He hadn't spoken a coherent sentence in 9 days. Caden stood on the porch in his socks, shoes in the grass, and looked up at the window where his dad's room was. The light was off. He picked up his shoes and walked. He hadn't always been invisible in that house. When his mother, Dana, was alive, the house on Ridgemont Drive smelled like coffee and something baking. His dad would come home and lift him off the ground even when he got too old for it. They watched football games that ran past midnight. Dana would fall asleep on the couch, and Devin would carry her upstairs, and Caden would pretend he wasn't watching from the hallway because it made him feel embarrassed and safe at the same time. Dana died on a Tuesday in March. Pancreatic cancer. 41 years old. Devin remarried 14 months later. Her name was Renee Holloway. She had 2 kids, Tyler, 13, and Bryn, 11. And a smile that reached her eyes only when Devin was in the room. The moment he turned away, it vanished like smoke. Within 6 weeks, Caden understood what had changed. Tyler and Bryn got the new game systems, the brand new sneakers, the seats closest to Devin at the dinner table. Caden got the chores. Every morning before school, he cleaned the kitchen, sorted the recycling, took out the trash, and walked Renee's dog. A fat, aggressive bulldog that hated him. He didn't complain. Not once. The one time he told Devin that Renee had made him skip lunch to repaint the garage fence. His dad had looked at him with foggy eyes and said, "I'm sure she had her reasons, bud." That was 3 weeks before Devin got sick. The sickness came fast. One morning Devin was Devin, sharp, early riser, protein shake in hand, already on the phone. By that Friday he was in bed, unable to finish his own sentences. Doctors said it was neurological. They ran tests. Everything came back inconclusive. Renee took over. She moved through the house differently after that. Slower, more deliberate. She opened filing cabinets Caden had never seen opened. She made phone calls behind closed doors. She walked room to room with a yellow notepad, writing things down. Once, Caden passed the hallway and heard her on the phone. "He can't tell the difference anymore. Trust me. We have a window." He froze. He stood there for 4 seconds. He counted, then kept walking. That night, he went to Tyler's room and knocked. Tyler opened the door, looked at him and said, "My mom said you're not allowed in here." Caden nodded and went to bed. The next morning, Renee stood outside his door at 6 a.m. "Your father doesn't need the extra stress of having you around," she said, like she was reading from a script. "This isn't working. You need to go stay with someone." "With who?" Caden asked. She looked at him without blinking. "That's not my problem." He had no grandparents left. His dad's brother, Uncle Trey, lived in Portland and hadn't called in 2 years. His mother's side was a broken map of people he barely remembered. He packed a bag. Jeans, 2 shirts, a jacket, a granola bar, and his mom's old field notebook. The one she used for hiking, small and dark green with a rubber band around it. He left. The woods on the east side of Millbrook bordered an old state park that most people ignored. Caden found a spot past the Second Creek crossing, sheltered by a cluster of oaks, invisible from the trail. He built a lean-to from branches the first night. It rained. He didn't sleep. By day 4 he had a routine: water from the creek, food from a gas station dumpster 2 miles out, back before dark. By day 9 he was trying to build something sturdier, something with a floor. He was digging with a metal tent stake when it hit something. Not rock, not root, plastic. He dug around it, pulled. The ground gave way and the bag came up heavy, heavier than anything he expected, the kind of weight that makes your wrists buckle. He untied it. Stacks of cash. Banded. Hundreds on the outside of each bundle. More money than Caden had ever seen outside of a movie. He looked around. Nothing. Just trees and wind. He sat with the bag for a long time. His first thought wasn't, what can I buy? It was, why is this buried? Someone put this here. Someone knew exactly where to dig. This wasn't a robbery stash. The bills were too clean, too organized. This was a decision someone made deliberately. He covered the bag again, marked the tree with 3 scratches from his tent stake, and sat with his back against the oak. He thought about his dad. Devin Pruitt hadn't eaten a real meal in weeks. He had a condition nobody could diagnose. He was in a house with a woman who was going through his files and making phone calls about windows. Caden closed his eyes. When he opened them, the decision was already made. He hiked to the edge of town just after dawn, found a payphone outside a laundromat and called Millbrook General. Devin Pruitt. Room status. The woman on the phone paused. Are you family? His son. Another pause. Longer. Sir, your father was admitted 2 days ago. He's in room 214. His condition is listed as serious. The phone hit the cradle before she finished the sentence. Caden walked into Millbrook General looking like exactly what he was. A kid who had been sleeping outside for 11 days. Dirt under his fingernails. Jacket with a tear along the left shoulder. Eyes too steady for his age. The nurse at the front desk almost stopped him. He got to room 214 before she could. His dad looked smaller. That was the first thing. Devin Pruitt had always taken up a room, voice, presence, the way he stood. But the man in the bed looked like a sketch of his father, like someone had traced around him and left out the weight. Caden put his hand on the bed rail. I'm here, he said quietly. I'm going to fix it. His dad's eyes moved. Didn't focus. But they moved. The doctor came in 20 minutes later. Dr. Anayam Becky, tall, direct, clipboard against her chest. She looked at Caden. Are you his son? Yes. Where has your family been? We've been trying to reach someone for 2 days. Something moved in Caden's chest. Cold and slow. What does he need? Dr. Becky studied him for a moment. Then she pulled a chair over and sat across from him, which told him before she spoke that this was going to be serious. Your father needs surgery. There's a blockage and something in his blood work we've been treating as toxicity, possibly something ingested over time. She let that land. The surgery is specialized. The total cost without insurance clearance is significant. We've been unable to reach anyone authorized to make decisions. I'm authorizing it, Caden said. Dr. Becky looked at him, at his jacket, his hands, the dried mud on his left boot. This surgery costs $62,000. Caden held her gaze. I know. You're 14. Give me the account number. She gave it to him. She didn't know why. 30 years of medicine, and she gave a 14-year-old boy in a torn jacket the hospital's transfer account number. She told herself it was because she'd seen desperation before, and this wasn't desperation. This was something else. Something she didn't have a word for. He was back at 7:15 the next morning. He slid the transfer confirmation across the front desk without a word. The surgical team was prepped by 9. The surgery took 4 hours and 12 minutes. Caden sat in the waiting room the entire time. He didn't eat. He didn't move. He held his mother's green notebook on his lap and didn't open it. At 2:18 p.m., Dr. Becky walked out. She smiled before she spoke. Caden exhaled for the first time in 4 hours. Devin Pruitt spent 6 days recovering at Millbrook General. Caden was there every day. Not performing, not explaining himself. Just there. Sitting. Reading. Talking sometimes when his dad was alert enough to listen. On the 4th day, Devin looked at him clearly for the first time. Caden. Hey, Dad. His father looked at the ceiling for a long moment. Something was wrong. For a long time, something was wrong. I could feel it, but I couldn't. He stopped, pressed his lips together. I couldn't get to it. I know. Renee, don't worry about that yet. Devin turned his head and looked at his son. At the boy he'd somehow lost track of while he was drowning in whatever Renee had fed him, whatever she'd slowly introduced into his system over months, careful enough to mimic a neurological condition, patient enough to wait for the tests to keep coming back inconclusive. Where were you? Devin asked. While I was here. Where were you living? Caden looked at the window. I was fine. Devin's eyes filled. He didn't push. That silence between them, for seconds, maybe 5, was heavier than everything that came before it. No explanation. No apology. Just a father and a son on opposite sides of something enormous, finding each other on the other side of it. That was enough. On day 6, Caden made a call he'd been delaying. Not to Renee. To Devin's oldest friend, a man named Gerald Oates, who had practiced contract law in Millbrook for 30 years and who Devin had once described as the only person he trusted completely with a secret. Gerald answered on the second ring. Caden? I've been trying to reach your father for weeks. Where is he? Hospital. He's okay now. But Gerald, Caden paused. I need you to pull every property document you have for my dad. Right now. Before you do anything else. Silence. Then, how fast do you need me to move? Yesterday. Gerald Oates called back in 2 hours. His voice was different. Flat and cold in the way that lawyers get when they are trying not to show that they are furious. Caden, your stepmother filed a transfer of property deed on the Ridgemont Drive house 11 days ago. The signature is your father's. But it's not your father's signature. Caden sat very still. She forged it, Gerald continued, and she had someone notarize it badly. The document has 3 inconsistencies I caught in 20 minutes. She's also accessed his business accounts. 6 transfers over 4 weeks, each just below the threshold that triggers automatic review. Caden thought about the phone call in the hallway. We have a window. Can you stop it? Caden asked. I can do more than stop it, Gerald said. Devin signed the complaint from his hospital bed. Gerald filed it that afternoon. By the time Renee came home from wherever she'd been, Caden never found out, didn't care. There were 2 Millbrook PD officers in the driveway and Gerald Oates standing on the front porch with a folder of documents under his arm. Caden was there too. He stood on the lawn and watched her see him. Her face went through 3 things in fast succession. Surprise, calculation, then something raw and ugly that she didn't bother hiding. You, she said. Hi, Renee. You did this. Not a question. You went digging where you don't belong. Caden looked at her calmly. I belong here. My dad built this house. My mom's name is on the deed. This is the most where I belong I've ever been. She stepped toward him. One of the officers moved. You were going to let him die, Caden said quietly. And then you were going to take everything he built. That's what the window was, right? Before anyone noticed. Her jaw tightened. I have no idea what you're. You had 14 months, he said. He brought you into his house 14 months after my mom died. He trusted you. Caden paused. He was lonely. That's the only reason you're standing here right now. Because he was lonely. Something crossed her face. He didn't look away from it. Tyler and Bryn didn't know, he said softer. Right? Her chin moved slightly, almost a nod. I know, Caden said. Gerald already made sure they're placed with your sister in Columbus. They're okay. She stared at him. She didn't say anything after that. The officers moved forward, and she went with them, and it was quieter than Caden had expected. No shouting. No final speech. Just the car door and the sound of tires on the stone driveway. Gerald put his hand on Caden's shoulder for a moment, then walked back to his car to make calls. Caden stood on the lawn alone. He looked up at the window on the second floor. His dad's room, the one that had been dark the night Renee threw his shoes into the yard. The light was on. Devin came home 8 days later. He walked through the front door slowly, Caden beside him, and stood in the entryway for a long moment without speaking. The house felt different. Cleaner somehow, though nothing had changed. "I need to tell you something," Caden said. They sat at the kitchen table, the same table where Tyler and Bryn had eaten while Caden stood in the doorway, and Caden told his father everything. The woods, the digging, the bag, the money. He described the spot exactly. The oak with 3 scratches. The second creek crossing. Every detail. Devin listened without moving. When Caden finished, his father was quiet for a long time. "And you used it for the surgery," Devin said finally. "And a month's worth of supplies. And you left the rest exactly where you found it." "Yes." Devin nodded slowly. There was something behind his eyes, recognition, Caden thought. Like a man seeing a room he'd designed years ago and finding it exactly as he left it. "I'm proud of you," Devin said. "Just that. Nothing else." He never told Caden the money was his, the cash he'd pulled quietly from the business over 8 months when he first began to suspect that the woman he'd married was watching his accounts more carefully than she watched his face. He'd buried it the way his own father had taught him to protect things. Quietly, without ceremony, in the ground. He never told Caden, but he thought about it every day for the rest of his life. That his son had found the money, held it in his hands, counted it in the quiet of the woods, and never once thought to spend $1 of it on himself. Caden went back to school the following Monday. Nobody knew where he'd been. The official story, Gerald's version, the clean one, was that he'd been staying with a family friend during Devin's hospitalization. He sat in third-period chemistry and stared at the board and thought about nothing in particular. At lunch, a kid named Drew slid into the seat across from him and said, "Heard your dad was sick. Is he okay?" "Yeah," Caden said. "He's good now." Drew nodded and went back to his phone. That was it. That was the whole conversation. Caden ate his lunch and didn't say anything else. And it was the most normal 20 minutes he'd had in months. And he felt something loosen slightly in his chest that he hadn't realized was still clenched. 2 years later, Devin handed Caden a key. Not a house key. A small, flat key for a safety deposit box at First Community Bank on Garfield Avenue. "When you're ready," Devin said. "Not before." Caden took it. He didn't ask what was inside. He already knew it wasn't about what was inside. He put the key in his pocket, next to his mother's green field notebook, and went to set the table for dinner. There is a photograph from that year, Devin and Caden at the Ridgemont house, standing in the front yard, taken by Gerald Oates on some ordinary Tuesday afternoon. Devin has his arm around Caden's shoulder. Caden is looking at the camera. He isn't smiling exactly, but his eyes are clear. And if you look carefully, if you really look, you can see that the boy in the photograph has already decided what kind of man he's going to be. He decided in the woods, with a bag of money in his hands and no one watching. That's the part nobody photographed. That's the part that mattered.